Good evening. My name is Stella Chitralekha Biswas, and I am a faculty at the Department of English, Sarojini Naidu College for Women, Kolkata. I welcome you to the stories of tribal identity and culture that will explore the role of tribal history and tribal representation in history in shaping cultural identity and ideology, curated under TMYS Review, Summer 2023, in collaboration with the Center for Asia Pacific Initiatives, University of Victoria. We are also calling for the submission of essays, poems, and short stories under the project. To know more about the submission guidelines and the project architecture, please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. This evening, I consider myself very privileged to be in the company of our esteemed panelists, Dr. Sayan and Dr. Mridula Rashmi Kindo, who will shortly share their views and insights with us. The topic for today's discussion is gender roles in tribal traditions and heritage under the sub-theme Costume and Cuisine Defining Tribal Identity, a Historical Review. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker for the session is Dr. Sayan. Dr. Sayan grew up in Kolkata, West Bengal, and is currently working as a postdoctoral fellow at WIT Center for Diversity Studies, University of Witwatersrand. He is also a faculty fellow at the Harriet Tubman Institute, York University, Canada. His latest published edited volume is Myths, Histories, and Decolonial Interventions, A Planetary Resistance by Routledge in 2022. His monograph is titled Green Academia Towards Eco-Friendly Education Systems, published by Routledge in December 2022. His areas of research interest are post-colonial studies, decolonial studies, critical race studies, food humanities, and critical diversity literacy. He can be reached at www.shayonde.com. We are delighted to have you on the panel, Dr. Dey. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our second speaker for the session is Dr. Mridula Rashmi Kindo. Dr. Mridula Rashmi Kindo is an associate professor at Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. She holds a graduate degree from Delhi University and a postgraduate and MPhil degrees from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Her PhD is on South African literature. She has more than 20 years of teaching experience. Her areas of specializations include South African literature, new literatures in English, literature from the margins, and translation studies. She has designed and developed bachelor's degree and master's degree courses of English. She has worked extensively on tribal literature and has developed an elective course, Writing from the Margins, for the MA program that includes the tribal discourses. She is working on an interdisciplinary MA program on tribal studies. She has chaired sessions and presented papers at various national and international conferences. She has also published several papers in national and international journals of repute. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Kindo. Thank you for joining us this evening. We will now open the forum for discussion. I would request Dr. Dey to share his insights on the topic. Over to you, sir.
First of all, thank you so much, Stella, for this really warm invitation and a warm introduction. And it's a pleasure to share a panel with such really thought-provoking and diverse scholars like Dr. Kindo. And I believe that our other panelists will be able to join us soon in the process. What I'm going to do in the course of next 10 minutes is I'm going to share a fragment of my current research project, which centrally engages with the Siddhi community in Gujarat. Now, prior to moving into the aspects of the Siddhi community, I would like to clarify two perspectives. I will try to avoid as much as possible the usage of the term tribal. Rather, I will like to use the term indigenous because I am a bit skeptical about the term tribal, especially uh, considering the problematic and the violent history, especially the European colonial history of tribalization of indigenous communities in India and across the world. And the number two aspect which I would like to share is that as I speak about the indigenous, about a particular indigenous community, I speak from very specific set of positionalities, and I must acknowledge that I emerge from a non-indigenous community space. So when I work with this community, obviously I work from a non-indigenous uh, cultural perspective, a non-indigenous historical perspective, and I, in the process of that, I learn, I unlearn, I undergo unsettlements, also a lot of challenges in the process. But I think it is just a part of the process of researching and working with across different indigenous communities across the country and the world. And I very much acknowledge the process. I acknowledge my experiences, but but at the outset, I thought of sharing this my positionality as well, so that no one really mistakes my reflections as a sort of generalization of perspectives or a sort of appropriated perspectives. Now, the Sindhi community is basically the Afro Indian community who are based in different parts of India. Widely, they are found in Gujarat, in the state of Gujarat, in the state of Karnataka, in Telangana. Uh, a bit of them are existent in Goa and Kerala, and mostly in this, and also widely in Maharashtra as well. And their historical evolution, so they historically trace their ancestry from diverse parts of, mostly from east and northeastern parts of Africa, and a few from, especially those who are based in the southern parts of India, like Karnataka, Maharashtra, like southwestern parts of India, Maharashtra, in Kerala, in Goa. They trace their ancestry from southern parts of Africa, and they came into India across different points of time, across 14th century, 15th century, and then later on, prior to that with the Islamic invaders, then later on with the Portuguese colonizers, and they came as slaves, they came as palace guards, they came as musicians, they came as artists. So when these Africans came into India, they came with different professional backgrounds, and but a majority of them came as slaves in India, and then gradually with the passage of time they got integrated with the Indian socio-political space. And that is how, on the one side, uh, they have always struggled to preserve their ancestral values, their ancestral knowledge systems, and on the other side they also adopted the local cultures and traditions. So the very perspective of indigenousness that we are able to see within these communities is very creolized in nature. And what do I mean by creolized in nature is that they are a sort of a mix up of, or a sort of where certain ancestral traditional African cultures are interwoven with local traditions and cultures. So the purpose of sharing this is we need to really understand the context from which I am using the term indigenousness as well. Now, coming to this question, that is the central aspect of our discussion today. How what we see now, how do they actually live up to their indigenous values and traditions, which are very much rooted in different points of time and space across the Indian Ocean? In nutshell, it's very transoceanic in nature. How do they do that, and what role women plays there? So obviously the first is, if I specifically focus on the indigenous culinary practices, amongst the Siddhi community in Karnataka, it is mostly seen, through the ways in which they have, on the one side, they have locally adopted a lot of those, culinary cultures, because a majority of the cities in Karnataka continue to stay in the rural parts of the country, and many try to stay very close to the forest, because obviously, number one, the challenges that they have encountered in terms of marginalization, in terms of racial marginalization, in terms of cultural marginalization, and the other part is obviously how they feel very close to the environment. So in terms of Creole culinary cultures, what we see is, let's say, a very famous culinary practice among the cities in Karnataka is murdi bhaji. Murdi is a sort of a wild leafy plant, like almost like spinach, but it's a wild leafy plant which is found around the forests regions in Yellapura and other places in Karnataka where they stay, and they prepare a vegetable out of that. Now, that is not necessarily African, but the sort of ancestral elements that you see in that practice is how they draw their food and culinary practices right from the natural environment rather than imbibing it from the city. The other food item that I would like to mention is red ant chutney. Obviously, red ant chutney is also very quite common amongst various indigenous communities across other parts of India as well. And they prepare the red ant chutney by, first of all, catching them and then obviously killing them, and then mixing it with various forms of local spices that they prepare at home, and also the spices that they get from the city, like, I mean, ginger, onion, garlic paste, and then they sort of prepare a sort of chutney which they have with rice and dal and other sort of stuffs. So these are very specific. If you talk something about very specific to the Siddhi community culinary practice in Karnataka, these are the two which are very unique to the Siddhi community in Karnataka. And one example I will also give it, and obviously women play a very important role here because the food is centrally prepared by the women, and so women play an empowering role in terms of preserving these traditional Siddhi culinary practices within their community in Karnataka. Another aspect of women and Siddhi and culture is obviously the patchwork quilt, which is again very traditionally Siddhi in nature. The patchwork quilt that they make, which are being basically woven by these Siddhi women in Karnataka, in different parts of Karnataka. And in order to sort of publicize their work, a lot of universities and organizations which are mostly based in US, but also a few now have come up locally in Karnataka, and from the government and other institutions locally in India, they're also taking initiatives to present their work to the world. So what they do is uh, they basically make sure, in order to avoid the commercialization of their patchwork quilts as much as possible, they don't, or these organizations, they don't sell these patchwork quilts to sort of those brands, right? What they do is they even don't buy it from them and resell it somewhere. They present these works to the, let's say they will do a sort of exhibition in the US or in the UK or in the very privileged part spaces in India, and the money that they the amount that is for which those patchwork quilts are sold, that amount is completely handed over to these community members, and they invest it in their own way for the sake of their community progress. So, and in terms of weaving this patchwork quilt, if you look at the designs, they are very similar to the sort of patchwork quilt works if you see in Kenya, if you see in Zanzibar, if you see in Tanzania, if you see in Sudan, and in various other parts of various other parts of East Africa, Northeast Africa, and also in other parts of Africa as well. So this is another aspect where they actually, you know, on the one side, they sort of preserve their ancestral cultures, ancestral artworks, and on the other side, they also imbibe the local art techniques and cultures to integrate them, a sort of create a very creolized, transoceanic, and transcultural space for themselves. And so, yes, I think I'll stop here. Maybe I'll continue with the conversations in terms of questions and reflections. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your observations, Dr. Day. I would now request Dr. Kindo to take over and share her thoughts on the topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, since we have you given us 10 minutes of time, I'll try to talk as much I can about the costume and the cuisine defining tribal identity. So, costume and cuisine reflect the tribal identity and culture of the tribals. And from the earliest times, tribal people have been living in close proximity to the forests, and they have been cohabiting with the wildlife for ages. So, these people are closely related to natural resources for their basic needs. So they are dependent on the flora and the fauna for food and clothing. And both food and clothing are linked to the geography and available resources. So food and clothing evolved according to the local climate, and the food is sourced from surroundings, that is forests and rivers. And according to a study, these tribal communities are acquainted to the use of about 9,000 species of plants, including food, that is, food plants. And they also know about around 7,500 species of plants, which are used for medicinal purposes. So the food is adapted according to the habitat and physiological needs. And the locally available resources in central India, that is Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa, mainly comprises of wild tubers, herbs, greens, meats of animals and birds, which they consume from the local surroundings. And the food that grows in the habitat, such as rice and pulses and oil seeds, also form a major part of their food. And these people know they have a huge repository of traditional knowledge system that enables them to use different varieties of forest herbs and plants as medicines. So and these tribals were mostly hunters who were living in forests near rivers, and their surroundings had a lot of wild animals, and that's how the meat and fish became an integral part of their food. And most of the big animals which they hunted, they they couldn't consume the meat in a day, so they dried them, fermented them, smoked them, so that they could be preserved for months. They and also the seasonal vegetation that they cultivate, they dry them and ferment them because they do not grow throughout the year, so that they can consume it throughout the year. And meat and seasonal fish are dried, and then bamboo shoots are also dried and kept, so that they can use this as condiments in their dishes. And they usually have these earthenware or clayware, and the cuisines are made in them, prepared in them, so that it becomes flavorful. And these earthenware and clayware, they also have other benefits, like they have nutrients like calcium, phosphorus, uh, iron, magnesium, which is combined with the food, and it is beneficial for their body. And clay is also alkaline, and which neutralizes the acidity in the body. So uh, it gives them a lot of nutrition. The food which is eaten is also served in dried leaves or fresh leaves of, especially in Jharkhand you will find sal trees. The leaves are plucked, they are pinned together with sticks, and there the food is prepared, or they are also barbecued in that, especially meat and fish, and they are also served in those leaves. Then they have kansa plates, which is also called bronze, so they have their own medicinal and healing properties. And these tribals, they use minimalist amount of spices. They use basic spices like chilies, turmeric, onions, ginger, garlic, and salt. So even and that does not make the food bland, but it retains their flavor of each vegetable or the meat item which they cook. And these uh, they they also use a lot of oil, in fact different varieties of oil, because in Jharkhand you get oil like jatangi, kusum, dori. So all these surguja, so they have different properties which help them retain good health. So then rice is again abundantly grown in Jharkhand and in Chhattisgarh and in Orissa. So and they eat the rice which they have are actually they are thrashed in the thresher. As a result, the only the husk of that red rice is removed, and they have all the nutrients. And they have different varieties or ways in which rice is cooked. they boil the rice. They use the starch, which they call mar, and in that starch they cook dried vegetables, and that is like a kind of dal for them, you know. And even the rice which they use as bothal bhat, which is starch, the rice, which is hot rice, which they take, they mix the mar or the starch in it, and they eat it with salt and dried vegetables. So they have different varieties in which rice is cooked. Then pitha is another delicacy of Jharkhand and Orissa and other parts of central India, where it is steamed. So it is called dumbo pitha, which is made of jaggery and rice powder, which is prepared by the Uram and the Santhal tribes. Then in Assam, we have the pithas, which is prepared with rice powder, black sesame seeds, coconut, and jaggery. So even in the northeast, because rice is grown in abundance, they use a lot of rice-based consume a lot of rice-based dishes. Then in the northeast states, they also do not use much of spices, whatever is available in their surrounding or in their location. So they use bamboo shoots, garlic and ginger, chilies and tomatoes. That is the only those are the only spices which they use for their meat items or fish items. And the dish of the northeast, they ferment food items, and it is they have fermented soya bean, they have bamboo shoots which are fermented, then they smoke meat. So all these techniques are used, which make the food rich in nutrient. Smoked pork is a delicacy all over the Northeast. It is cooked with different spices, and which is available in their place. So in Nagaland, bamboo steamed fish and pork with bamboo shoots are very popular, and they are also available in cities today, and people relish them. In the Northeast, we have they use the techniques of roasting, barbecuing, smoking, and fermenting, and they have the sticky rice, which is very popular, and it's eaten with chicken anishi, which is chicken cooked with yam leaves. On and another dish which is chicken akhuni, which is chicken which is made in fermented soya. So these are other dishes which are quite popular there. So you have different people, tribes from the northeast who make they have these different kinds of rice dishes with different kinds of meat and veggies or vegetables. Then tribals, they think that they have this concept that they should not waste any food, so they try to eat the roots, the stems, the leaves of all of the vegetables. Then the offal of the animals, which is the internal organs, which they eat every part of the animal, that is the testicles, kidney, intestine, tongue, tails, feet, head, brains, then brain, and then heart and liver. So they do not leave any part of the animal, because they hunt animals with great effort, and they can't afford to not eat any part, or throw away any part of that animal. In Meghalaya, in the northeast, there's this dish called jado, which is prepared with pig liver. They protect this in this way. By eating everything which they get, they protect the earth and contribute to the conservation of ecology by 0% wastage. Then there's another, millets are also very common in villages. Now, these days, the UN General, in fact, this year is the International Year of Millets. But the tribals have been eating millets from the time immemorial, where they use in Jharkhand, you have little millets or gondli rice, which is sown with the paddy, and it is harvested before the paddy is ready, and they eat that as boil it, and they eat it. Even the Gond tribes, they consume millets, which is the kodo millet and the kutki millet, which they make into porridge or broth, and eat it with dry vegetables. Then in Arunachal Pradesh, zan, which is another tribal dish, which they prepare by using millet, and they boil it into porridge with boiling water, and it is eaten with boiled meat or with vegetables. And then with constant population migration and rapid urbanization, the mainstream is also realizing the importance of tribal cuisines, and the people have become more health conscious, and they think that it is the best option to rely on the tribal cuisine because it has natural and simple methods of preparing food. And they also find they gradually find they are finding the way into the mainstream as it has high nutrition content, and it is beneficial for their health. And coming to the dress or the way the tribals has have been dressing, or the attire from ages, they have been these tribals have been dressing differently in different geographic region, and their culture and tradition are reflected in the clothes which they wear. And mostly they wear fibers which are made of cotton, linen, or wool derived from sheep, fibers from plants, trees, and other sources available. So, and the tribal groups always wear organic clothes which are made of organic material, and they use colors which are comes from natural dye, which is extracted from trees, plants, flowers, and seeds. And the colors and designs of the costume of different tribes hold different symbolic meaning. So the tribals have always been weaving, and they have excelled in weaving and made fine fabrics for their use. These tribals have woven clothes they wear. The designs of the clothing again is very distinct in each tribe. The women from different tribes create their own designs to give an identity and style to the tribals, and they love to embroider the outfits also, so to make it appealing. So you find tribal paintings or other art forms created as designs in different clothing of the men and women. Then the clothes are hand woven with different patterns and designs. Then the tribal women of central India, in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, they used to wear that thick hand woven one piece cloth, which had which was had a white body with red border, and they would wrap it like a sari, though they did not know the concept of sari that time, but it was one cloth which was wrapped to cover their bosom and also the abdomen and lower part of the body. So, and the women would wear it till their knees to facilitate easy movement. And the width and the design of the border of these wraps would distinguish each tribe. So Uraos would have a different they would have different patterns, and Thalis would have different pattern. Khadia tribe, they had different patterns. So the width of the design of the border of these wraps would distinguish each tribes. And men would wear a loin cloth and pagdi. Mostly they would be bare chested, and the turban would protect them from the sun. And the accessories worn by both men and women were made either by the teeth or bones of animals, barks or of trees, or rocks chiseled into ornaments. And later, slowly, they started wearing silver, beads, and beaded jewelry, or jewelry made of other uh, parts of animals. So women also got tattoos made on their forehead. That was how they would beautify themselves. They would tattoo their necks, hands, arms, and feet. And this was the tattoo they got from the herbs. So it was very safe. And the jewelry which they wore were neck pieces, earrings, anklets, bangles, and they were made of metal casts or silver or wooden materials. And most of the tribes have very vibrant color for the attire, which gives them color, especially the tribes of Rajasthan, where the atmosphere is very dry and dreary. So they used to wear they from the beginning they've been wearing very vibrant uh, clothes. And each tribe again has distinct weaves and motifs, and they symbolize their stories of ancestors, social values, and their customs. The northeastern women would wear sarongs or wraparound skirts with a blouse, and men would wear a single piece of cloth, like something like a loin cloth. So, and turbans were a must for every tribal, because most of the time they were in the sun working in their fields. So they usually would wear these turbans. And in fact, people from the northeast, they had headgears which were made of animal skin or hair or bird feathers. Later, and slowly, people started wearing waistcoats. Whereas the men used to started wearing waistcoats, apart from their the loincloth and the turbans. So There is an effort made by the tribals of the Northeast to have the imprints of their worldview, oral narrators, and legends and songs in their weaves. And the weavers, mostly women, more wore designs on fabrics inspired by signs and symbol of everyday life. Then there were these tribes in Tripura, Tripuri tribe and Riang tribe. They would also wear unstitched costumes. The tribes of Tripura would wear the cloth which they call it is risha, which is draped like a wrap to cover their breast, and another one ringwai to cover their abdomen. And the color combination, patterns, and designs are different for different tribes. The Tripuri women, on the other hand, would wear only red and white colors, while Riang women would wear black and white colors. So the traditional colors would help them identify the village and the tribe, and they would weave these clothes on the backstrap loom, which is a very basic loom, and they used to collect cotton yarns which were grown locally, and then they would weave them. So they also dye the yarns in natural dyes. So the Riang women were classified into two categories based on the design worn by the elderly and the younger women. The younger women who were married or unmarried, wore ringwai with stripes in black and white, and the women who were elderly, that is the grandmothers or the mother-in-law, who were they would wear black ringwai with motifs on the border. So the tribals weave motifs were inspired by nature and objects used by them daily. So the motifs and their color combinations of tribes were different. For the Tripuri tribes, they would use butterflies, spider as motifs, and the Riang tribe, they use jasmine flower or bamboo flower or duck eggs as the common motifs. So, in the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, mill spun cotton yarns and acrylic yarns were introduced, and they gained popularity because they were these material was easy to handle. They were wrinkle free material. They gave more comfort and softness to the body, and they also were cheaper to maintain, and they were durable. And their traditional costume has undergone, in fact, all the, tribals all over India, the traditional costume has undergone change. They prefer the modern way of dressing and are gradually giving up the traditional way of dressing. And the traditional costumes have undergone changes in terms of fabrics, colors, and motifs. The traditional costumes have been given new style to make it more comfortable. Now, tribals are working in office, they are working in different fields, so they want to wear costumes which give them comfort, and they are trying to assimilate with the mainstream. So they use contemporary colors, as acrylic yarns are available in different shades. At present, commercialization has forced the weavers in the villages to create new designs that cater to the demands of the market. And with the changing times, these tribals have started using contemporary motifs. So, using new motifs shows change in lifestyle. And another reason is that the new generation of weavers are not as talented as the elders. So they prefer making simpler motifs, simpler patterns. The tribes have begun wearing patterns and motifs of different tribal communities. Even cotton yarns are not used in northeastern states except in very few places. The hand embroidery is used less, as machine embroidery is made faster. They buy fabrics from the market and they use machine made fabrics. So slowly, the weavers are also with there are very few weavers, and so their traditional clothes, it's becoming more expensive. So with modernization, change is unavoidable. The lifestyle of these tribals are changing with the rapid space of time. With the passage of time, the tribals have also tried to match their attire with people, that is the mainstream, and their way of dressing has changed. So they've tried to bring changes with a perfect blend of traditional and the modern styles. So for now, I think I'll stop here and we'll discuss whatever questions come to me.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives, ma'am. Our third speaker for the session is Dr. Lisa Pachuau. Dr. Lisa Pachuau is from Mizoram and is currently working as an assistant professor at the Fashion Design Department, NIFT Shillong. She completed her graduation, post-graduation, and doctoral program from the University of Delhi. Her doctoral study was on traditional textiles and costumes of the Mizos, Luce, and Lai tribes. Lisa started her career as an assistant professor in the Department of Fabric and Apparel Science, Lady Irwin College, University of Delhi, where she worked for almost 6 years. She has supervised dissertations on various topics like documentation of traditional textiles and costumes, sustainable fashion, eco printing, etc. Her areas of interest include traditional Indian textiles and costume, pattern making, garment construction, draping, surface ornamentation, etc. She has also published several articles in journals and magazines, as well as presented papers in national and international conferences. It is a pleasure to have you with us today, Dr. Pachuau. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Stella. Uh, as my friends have already mentioned about the importance of costumes among the tribal context, I would like to add a few more points of view from my side. As Stella has mentioned, my work was on the traditional textiles of the Mizos, and I would like to focus more on the traditional textiles of the Mizos today. Uh, yeah, when we talk about costume, it is the visual expression of one's identity, and it's a way of expressing ourselves in a social culture. Among the Mizos, puan is one of the most common garment that we have. So when we say puan, it's a simple fabric, a woven fabric, and any textile that is woven is called puan. It's just a piece of textile. If you use that piece of textile as a wraparound, it's still called puan. So it's not just a textile or a garment in context to the Mizos. It has a lot of cultural significances, which I would like to highlight. Um, it is used as a gift on marriages. So when a girl got married, she is supposed to take that textile puan as a gift to her in-laws, which would be distributed to the female members of her in-laws, which is called puantom. So puantom necessarily need not be any traditional textiles. It can be any traditional textiles, provided that there is one particular traditional textiles, puandum, which plays a very important role in the community among the Mizos. Secondly, puan is also used as a gift to mourn the lost when in times of death, which is called mitikhu na puan. So this tradition is still followed till to date. It could be any piece of cloth. In practice, we would give a solid color wraparound, not those with motifs. So those uh, woven fabric given to mourn the loss of our beloved ones are called mitikhu na puan. Apart from that, some of our traditional textiles like pondum is used as an attire for a dance called kwalam, which literally would mean dance of the guests. So this particular dance in traditional times, in olden times, they were performed by the guest who entered the village for a particular celebration, which is called Kwangtoi. So I would just like to highlight that puan is not just an attire, it's not just a garment, but amongst the tribal community, these textiles plays a very important role. Secondly, I would like to highlight that these costumes also shows the craftsmanship of the women, the skills. In a tribal setting, like among the Mizos, women are expected to know weaving traditionally, which is supposed to meet the practical need of herself as well as her family. And when a girl got married, she has to carry a woven textiles. So once she start learning to weave for herself, she would prepare textiles that would be taken as gifts when she got married. So these traditional textiles, these textiles, when you look at them, you get to see the craftsmanship of women. And as mentioned earlier, they are woven on a loin loom, which is a traditional loom, which is a backstrap tension loom. Uh, Although a lot of changes have happened on the use of these looms, currently a lot of our entrepreneurs are trying to revive the use of this loin loom. So when you look at these traditional textiles, they are not just a piece of textile, but they also show the craftsmanship, the skills of women, which is expected to be learned by all the women amongst the Mizo community. Secondly, these motifs are inspired by the nature, the surrounding. Most of the motifs are very simple. They are geometrical or maybe stylized, geometrical in shape, and they would, they have been inspired by things that they get to see in their everyday life, or it could be for a specific, for instance, like disul. D is sungrass. Sul means the pathway that you get to see when you walk through a sungrass. So they were trying to imitate or get inspired from these kind of things that they get to see in their everyday life. Apart from that, there are a lot more examples which you could see them on these traditional textiles. And when you talk about tribal textiles, especially among the Northeast, red and black are very prominent. So this could be because of the availability of the dyes in olden days, when indigo was used to get a darker color. It was said that a woman would take care of all the weaving and the dyeing and the household chores. So she would she would dye the yarn, the cotton yarn, a couple of times with the indigo to get a darker color. And the red color was believed to have been obtained from the locally grown fruits and vegetables. So until there was an exposure with the neighboring states, only these colors were used on the traditional textiles. So a lot of our traditional textiles, you will get to see the use of these colors. So after the interaction with people from the neighboring states, the synthetic dyes were available. Then they started using the synthetic dyes along with the synthetic yarns. So these changes were also observed among the Mizos and also the Northeast, other tribes of the Northeast. Apart from that, costume, like I have said, among the Mizos, Puan plays a very important role, and it also shows, somehow it shows the way of life, which reflects their belief. Like, for instance, example like Tang Tua Puan. So Tang Tua is a very prestigious title which could be achieved only by men who have wealth and who had achieved, who had killed a certain number of wild animals during their hunt and give a luxurious lift, as a luxurious feast, inviting the whole village, relatives, village, neighboring villages to celebrate for every kill, every animal that they hunt down. So to achieve that status, a man would, a man will have to be wealthy to give the feast. And according to the belief, according to the Mizos, once they achieve this status, they have a free pass to Pialral. Pialral is like a paradise. So once they have that free pass to Pialral, they would be served by the animals that they have hunted down. So only such men could wear this particular textile, Tang Tua Puan. And textiles like Tolok Puan, Tolok means never turning back. So those could be used only by brave men who, who would stand firmly not to move back in front of their enemies in their rights. So when villagers have those kind of men who have courage to wear such kind of textiles, they are in peace knowing that they have men who will stand for them. So these are some of the historical views that we could relate with the traditional textiles. Apart from that, amongst the women, um, as I have said, there are textiles like puante, which is one of the most common traditional textiles among the Mizo women. It's very colorful. So there is an evolution of this particular textile. In fact, puante is one of the five traditional textiles of the Mizos which has been given as a GI tag textile. Initially, when there was lesser availability of dyes, lesser availability of colors, textile was woven with a red band at the center, which was called Puan Lai Sen. Lai means the center and Sen means red. So it translates to a textile with a red band at the center. When women started developing their skills with the availability of other colors, they started beautifying that textiles. They started weaving traditional motifs on such kind of textiles, and later developed into a more decorated, a more beautiful textile, which is called puante. Te would mean to beautify. So slowly, Puan Lai Sen evolved into puante with the addition of colors, with the addition of motifs on the traditional textiles. So even amongst a community, there has been an observation of evolution of textiles. Apart from that, there are a couple of other textiles or costumes which you could relate with the history. Puandum, as I have mentioned earlier, is one of the most, one of the most textile which plays a very important role amongst the Mizos. It's not used as a wraparound traditionally. As I have mentioned earlier, there are some textiles which were taken as a gift during the marriage. This is one of the compulsory gifts which was supposed to be taken when a girl got married. So when these textiles are given, it is supposed to be used in case the husband happened to die during the lifetime of the wife. It is supposed to use to cover the dead body of the husband. And if a woman failed to take this as the gift, it's one of the first important tasks that she has to fulfill once she got married. So, and apart from that, it is said that the price of the women, like in Mizo community, when a girl got married, there's a tradition that we followed. A money, money is given to the is given by the groom to the bride's family. So this tradition is still followed. In olden days, it was priced to as much as a domesticated mitten. And if this gift of pondum was not taken during the time of marriage, the price of a woman will reduce to as much as tlaisial, which is equivalent to a domesticated mitten. So such kind of practices were seen during the olden times. Although this tradition is still followed, so the tradition of the bride price, and then the tradition of taking pondum as as a part of the marriage, the gift that a lady has to take during the marriage. All these traditions are still followed, but there are a couple of things that has also changed over the years, like tolopuan, the textile that I have mentioned, which was used by the warriors during their rite. Since since there has been a lot of changes after Christianity. A lot of our practices, a lot of the tribal practices are not continued. So the use of these traditional textiles have also changed slowly, but um, if you look at them, they are not just a piece of textiles, but they have a lot of insightful stories, which is closely related to the culture. Every culture, not only the Mizos, but it could be all the tribes, all the tribals of the Northeast and other parts of the country. So these traditional textiles, as I have mentioned, they they can be just a visual expression of one's identity, but yeah, they define tribal identity because they represent who we are, our our ancestors, what have happened in the past. So they are closely related to one's heart. And I would also just like to add a few more. The use of these yeah, raw materials have also changed over the years. In olden days, cotton was grown in the field, or some families would have their own cotton field. Processing and the weaving, the dyeing process, all these tasks were taken care and supposed to be a women's task. Men were barely involved in this kind of craft. But yeah, if you look at the history, there has been literature that has mentioned that during the courtship at night, men would help them. So this is the time when yeah, men would help women in their task. And the practice of this art of weaving is still practiced today, and till now it's mostly taken care by the women. And yeah, in few clusters it has also been observed that few of the men have started practicing this art, which was not really found in the olden days. So yeah, I would just like to conclude that these traditional textiles, these costumes, are not just visual expressions, but they are really significant. They have symbolism, they have meaning in each community, and are closely related to one's belief and rituals and the culture of the tribals. So I think that's all for now.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, Dr. Pachuau. We will now move on to the question and answer session. My first question is for Dr. Shayon De. Through your extensive research on the Siddhi tribal communities in India, have you observed any kind of persistent effort amongst these people to preserve their identity through various culinary practices? Or are their food choices primarily a result of economic disadvantage within the current scenario?
Okay, thank you so much, Stella, for this question. And also, thanks a lot, Dr. Lisa, for this really comprehensive and well detailed reflections on the perspective of textile histories and cultures, and how they just expand to different, not just for the sake of fashion, but also for the sake of different other forms of cultural, social, and gendered practices. Now, coming to this particular question, what I would like to share with respect to this aspect is, I think it's a combination of both. It's very difficult to sort of make a distinction between these two perspectives. I mean, obviously, on the one hand, if I just go back to my example of the culinary practices of the Siddhi community in Karnataka, and if you look at their culinary practices, on the one side, we see is they wish to maintain some of the ancestral traditions in terms of consuming foods that primarily grow in the natural environment where they stay, rather than depending on foods that are imported from the city. But also at the same time, their very existence near the forest, their very existence in the rural parts of the country, are both out of choice, and at the same time there is a sort of compulsion as well. And one particular aspect, which is racial discrimination or racial marginalization, that I shared at the beginning. So it's a combination of both. For instance, like on many occasions, let me tell you one another example. Like um, there is a culture of having something called the Bainamara, right? Now, what is a Bainamara? Bainamara is basically a stem, a type of a stem of a plant that stores its sort of water, that stores water in it. It's like a juice. So when they're out of money, or when they don't have sufficient money to support their uh, regular, dietary practices, at that time, they, for a long period of time, they depend on depending on the sap of the plant. And because that is fulfilling, that gives them energy, that keeps them going for days. Which is also, now, drinking the sap of the plant is also a part of the indigenous community culture in different, amongst various indigenous communities in India, and at the same time, in different parts of Africa as well. Another example in this context I would like to share is, in terms of having, like, the raw honeybees, like raw honey, like with, along with the hives. And that is another part, because it is very much high in protein and vitamin, and it is also very fulfilling in nature. So when there is a crisis of food where they encounter, they depend on these things that naturally exist in the forest. So this is another thing where they have that bits and pieces of honeybee hives, and that, sort of a serve as a source of food. It's not only delicious, but also it's fulfilling at the same time. But again, this same sort of culinary culture is also common amongst many indigenous African communities, especially in Central Africa, in Northern Africa, in Northeastern Africa. So with these examples, it is understandable that it is actually a sort of combination of both, where we see, on the one side, they are also preserving their ancestral traditions, but also the circumstance within which they consume these food items is often a reason of a sort of financial crisis.
Thank you very much for answering that, Dr. Day. My next question is for Dr. Kindo. What are your thoughts on the claim that popularizing tribal cuisine through the support of the hospitality and tourism sectors would bring about considerable empowerment of indigenous women? Ma'am, if I might ask you to unmute your mic before speaking. Could you just unmute your mic before speaking, ma'am?
Sure, sure. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. You are
So,
audible.
yes. Yes. So, in fact, in the present times, the culinary art, tribal culinary art, has been brought to these food festivals, because at present there's a food festival going on in Delhi, which is called Adi Mahotsav, and these culinary the tribals are bringing their culinary art to these food festivals, and they are showcasing their cuisines. Yeah, and that is enabling them to revive their varied cuisines and preserve their knowledge. And apart from that, uh, in fact, the government also, I think, could help these tribals to set up food joints by helping them with loans. And in fact, in Jharkhand, the capital of Jharkhand, in Ranchi, they have several food joints, tribal food joints, which sell authentic tribal food, and it's mostly women who are cooks and who are running these joints, and they are, in a way, they are, it's also empowering them. And regarding the hotel industries, in fact, the government could help these tribal women by asking these hotel management and institutes to employ these women who have a lot of knowledge about tribal culinary, and they can give training to these women can be employed, and they can give training about their food to the hotel management students. And also the government could allot them these women these kiosks in railway stations, in bus stands, and in public places, in order to empower them. So all these things can be done, which can help them showcase their cuisines and also to preserve their cuisines. Yeah.
Thank you very much for answering that, ma'am. My next question is for Dr. Pachuau. Most tribal communities are often seen preferring organic material for their attire and accessories. Is this a conscious manner of representing the richness of their indigeneity amidst the diversity of cultures and the demands of modernization?
Well, Stella, if I talk about the traditional attire and the accessories, especially in the Northeast, commuting was really a problem, and people were not really exposed to what was outside their surroundings. So I believe that it's one of their ways of celebrating what was around them. For instance, like the headgear. Vakiria, you must have seen Tero, the famous bamboo dance of Mizoram. So the headgear that the women, the dancers, they wore, it's called Vakiria. So if you look at that piece, the ones that you get to see nowadays are just, um, they are just plastic pieces or those things which are colorful. But traditionally, they were made of, feather of parrot, and which is very colorful, the most colorful bird that they get to see around them. Then the hanging thing which is just below the ear, that is also of nature. It's called pingpi, which is a wild bourgeois, which is available in the surrounding itself. Then below that there are some green color shiny glitters that you get to see. So nowadays they are just plastic pieces, but traditionally they are made of beetle wings. So all these are things that are available around them. I believe that it's their way, it's the way of celebrating the things that are around them. And if you talk about the attire also, as I have mentioned earlier, cotton was, they grow the cotton, they process themselves, they do the weaving themselves, the dyeing, they do it themselves, the weaving. So it's a kind of celebrating themselves and the surrounding that's around them. The motifs that you get to see on these traditional textiles, they are all inspired by the nature, not something which they never see. So I believe it's their way of uh, celebrating the things that they get to see around them.
Thank you very much for answering that, ma'am. My next question is again for Dr. Dey. How have the Siddhi women assimilated an Afro-Indian culture in their traditional attires?
See, it's important to note one thing, that in terms of the traditional attires that the cities, if you see just across India, not just in Karnataka but in other parts of India as well, the traditional is what they usually wear is the Indian traditional attire, right? So it's not very specifically something Siddhi, but what they have sort of maintained in terms of the traditionalism in terms of textiles is what I briefly referred to during my presentation as the patchwork quilt work. Like the patchwork quilts that they prepare, especially if you, and it is very, very specific to the Siddhi community in Karnataka, you will see a lot of similarities and overlaps in terms of the patchwork quilts that you see in places like Zanzibar and Kenya, not just and in terms of various dimensions. For example, in terms of the choice of colors, in choice of the designs, the way they weave those sort of designs actually narrate a lot of stories of how they have arrived in India from different parts of Africa across the ocean. For instance, sometimes in terms of patchwork quilts, you will see that they have woven different stones of different shapes, within that particular quilt. Now, those stones and of different shapes represent that the different stones that they brought from their country, or while they were crossing the Indian Ocean to come to Gujarat, or and then they went to other parts of India. They actually. collected the stones as memories, as a part of their, as a representation of culture, as a representation of their tradition. So the stories that they narrate is very traditionally Siddhi, because it's sort of through those particular designs on the quilts, which actually also narrate stories from their life, from their histories, from their cultures, from their contemporary state in India. So if you look widely in terms of the stories, in terms of the designs, in terms of the color combinations, you will see a lot of overlaps with the stories and the representations that you see in the quilt works in different parts of Africa, specifically in eastern and northeastern parts of Africa.
Thank you very much for answering that, Dr. Day. My next question is for Dr. Kindo. The consumption of alcoholic beverages is quite popular amongst both tribal men and women in various parts of India. Studies claim that it is a matter of serious health concern, despite being an age old cultural practice. What are your findings on the concerted efforts of tribal women against such alcohol abuse?
Yeah, thank you. So, actually, drinking hadia, or what they call rice beer in Jharkhand, is very common. And hadia is, or rice beer, it has more of medicinal properties than being, giving or giving a kick or a high, or which can be harmful for the people who drink because the haria, it cures jaundice and heat stroke. So and then there is the mahua wine, daru also, which is very popular in these tribal areas of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. And then they also have palm tadi, which is a kind of juice, fermented juice, which is which they consume. So actually, these if they take them in limits, these have medicinal properties, and it would not be harmful to their bodies. But mostly what these tribal men do is they look for the other desi daru, or the local desi daru, which is of low quality, which is like something like hooch, which has chemicals in them, and most of them drink that, and that is how it causes harm to them. And of course, the men do not listen to women. So women, even if they tell them not to drink, they cannot do much. But yes, women, they try to make medicines of herbs and try to mix it with their food without their knowledge, so that they can stop them from consuming their alcohol. And they have in fact, there are rehabilitation centers in the town, so what they can do is just to leave them there to cure them of such habits. Otherwise, mostly the women are helpless, because you can't actually stop these habits which these men are up to. Yeah.
Thank you very much for answering that, ma'am. My last question is for Dr. Pachuau. Do you feel the existence of unisex costumes among certain tribes in India is a way of expressing neutrality of choice and revising the binary concept of clothing?
In that regard, let me just give an example from the Mizo tribes. As I have said, one of the unisex textile that we have amongst our tribe is called pondum. So as I have said earlier, this textile is not used as a wraparound, but um, it's used as a dance attire. It's called unisex because it's used as a dance attire for the women as well as the men. And yeah, women will have to take it as a gift, as a part of her marriage gift. And there are certain other uses for which, depending upon the use, the name of this particular textile would change. So, yeah, traditional textile, unisex traditional textiles, like amongst the Mizo tribe, in the olden days, yeah, we do not have a lot of clothing. So what you have is just one or two. Nowadays, you have a lot of clothing in your Almirah. It's not like that in olden days. So whatever they wove, like the one that they use a casual attire, it was what they have. So it was not really, it did not really, express about the neutrality of choice. But that's the only thing they have. So things must have changed. Yeah, things of course have changed by now. But if you talk about these traditional costumes, uh, it did not, really express the neutrality of choice. It depends on the use of the textile and the things that were available. So a lot have changed, but on the costume bit, the traditional costumes, it depends on the use and the availability of the textiles for the family, because women were the only one. If the family have just a mother or maybe a sister who could weave, then it will depend on the number of textiles they will have. So as per se, for the unisex textiles, it does not really reflect to the neutrality of choice for the tribal textiles amongst the Mizos.
Thank you very much for answering that, ma'am. With that, we come to an end to tonight's discussion. I thank each one of you for sharing your wisdom and valuable insights with us. I'm sure our audience had a wonderful time and have learned a lot as well. We are grateful to you all for taking out time from your extremely busy schedules and for being a part of this discussion. It was an absolute pleasure to have been in your company this evening. This is to remind that we are calling for submissions on tribal history and tribal representation in history, the details of which can be viewed on www.tellmeyourstory.biz. Good night, everyone.